Yeah. Uh, you know, I'm not even gonna show my cup, or anything on screen. But I follow Haley, and Suki Desu because you're always screaming at all the right people. You've made all the right enemies. Halo, Haley. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't characterize this as a strong, passionate, you know, like I'm gonna base my whole life around this person or anything sort of sentiment. It's just sort of a hey, she seems pretty cool. You know, I kind of like her. You know, I don't. I wouldn't characterize it as a very strong, like potent attraction or anything, but it's there. It's present. Because I just constantly see her dunking on all the right people and bashing all the stupidity. Like anybody that's been a target of this particular corner of YouTube, and criticism pretty much had it coming by miles and miles and miles. I mean, I hardly. I don't know. I mean, when I see somebody always criticizing other people, I might want to distance myself from them a lot of the time, unless you're Halo Haley, who's always criticizing the right people. I mean, anybody that's been targeted by this channel, just yeah, they had it coming. But one of the things that she's spent a lot of time on is attacking the fucking water bottle culture shit that was going on, and with the Stanley Cups, and I'm left. I'm not, with this whole kids are being bullied over fake Stanley Cups, and then teachers came forward over the fact that they were being bullied by their students and all this other stuff for all this. And I'm reminded a lot of the time of one of my scathing criticisms of you know uh, school culture and everything, and what happens on the playground and in school and everything. The adults, they try to turn everything into a competition, so that the students that really shine can outshine one another and everything. But this results in most often a situation of sabotage by the students that ends up taking place, where the students, very much so try to subvert this culture and everything of competition, and being played off against each other and rebel against this idea of it. And one of the things that they do is they bully anybody who is too much of a brain and is too smart for their own good, apparently, inside the classroom and everything. Because if you come across that way, like the one thing that you'll get hit with in a classroom, honestly, is like, will you do my homework for me? Because you're so smart, and if you refuse, then you're not going to be well liked or received or anything, and at least at the K through 12 level. Now in college, you pull that shit and you're ripping yourself off. And the one thing that I would say to another student who told me that, like, look, I might know how to do it, but if you don't do it yourself, you're only cheating yourself out of that knowledge. Like, you paid to be here. Don't do this. This is just a bad decision on your part. Do the fucking work yourself, because you're not going to learn unless you do. And the but if it's taking place at the K through 12 level, most people are just trying to survive it. So that's what's going on. And when I but in the K through 12 level, it's almost always like that. There's like working class sabotage that happens, where it's like, well, we know that succeeding in the system would catapult us to the top of the. We would really actually accrue a ton of benefits, like a free ride through college. The system would kiss our asses for all of it. They would, ultimately, you'd get a free ride through all of it, and then you'd end up getting a good high paid career and everything. But you don't do that. You want to, at that level, your brain hasn't fully matured. You haven't hit the age of 27. Your frontal cortex hasn't fully kicked in. There's all this other stuff going on, and so you don't see it. You don't want to think about it. You don't want to anticipate the consequences of blowing off school at that level, or anything. And maybe there are the ways to succeed, and obviously there are. That's not the only way. They mislead you a lot of the time by saying this is the only way to to get into college so you can get a good career, and that's the only way you're actually going to get ahead in life. And it's like, oh god, there are so many people who are among the successful class of people who didn't take that life path. Like there are other ways to do it, but it's one of the most uh, it's one of the easier ways to do it because it has such a great track record of succeeding, you know, compared to other ways of succeeding. I mean, like, if you take the entrepreneurial path that I'm down myself, you're rolling the dice in a big way. You might succeed, you might not. You may get windfall profits one day and then, have problems making sales the next. Like, it's just a bit of a, like, see, like I'm selling on eBay. I'm obviously taking the entrepreneurial route, and I'm having a bit of trouble. Like my inventory not quite moving. I mean, I realize that the prices on some of these toys are quite high, so I'm making offers to discount them and everything. And nobody's biting, like But I mean, these are toys. I spent a good chunk of money on them myself so that I could sell them, and to gain the rights to sell them in the first place. Like so they cost me a good amount of what I'm charging for this stuff. They were not cheap to buy. It's not like I'm hitting my own customers with an insane markup on what I spent on it. A lot of the time with this stuff at this point, I'm just gaining the rights to try to sell this kind of inventory on Amazon where it catches better profits, and ugh, I don't know how various people got any of this stuff, on eBay or anything, and or on Amazon, and past all the problems that I had getting this shit approved and submitting it to their store, to their you know the Amazon store, but the thing is that I'm engaged in entrepreneurship at this point. I'm trying and everything, and but it's hard being an entrepreneur. It's not easy. It's not really a completely easy job. It's not as glamorous as it's made out to be. You have days like this where nothing is fucking moving and you're going fucking crazy. Like, you're just like, come on, like, seriously, it was a ton of work to even get this stuff up and listed in the first place. Like, why is nobody biting? And this stuff is not cheap. These are nice, high quality toys and everything. I don't buy crap. But no, that's not. I'm not so lucky, in that regard and everything. And I guess it's just, inflation's everywhere in the economy and system. So I guess I have some understanding, but at least my stuff's up in time for, Christmas, when everybody actually finally does start shelling out money for this part of the year. I hope that some of this stuff actually starts moving, because it's been clogging up my storage unit for a long time, which I don't want to have to pay for anymore. I want to clear out and then get rid of it, and stop having to pay the guy and everything. This $90 a month shit is not fun. Not a lot of. I would like my money, and to be able to put it towards something else other than I need to fucking pay for a place to fucking put all of it while I wait for somebody to buy it. Like, this is, ugh. But no, the Stanley Cup craze and everything that's happening, and to bring it back into focus, like, this is happening in large part because you've got members of the working class, right, who have gone into debt massively, doing stupid shit like tracing these water bottle trends and everything, and because they're spending $80 on a fucking cup and everything, and they know they got ripped off and everything, they're bullying other people to make the same stupid self-destructive decisions that they made so that they can go into a spiral of debt themselves. I mean, you realize that most of the people who look like they have money are some of the most broke people in our society, and I could tell you stories about this. My ex was exactly this way, Just NASCAR family, had tons of big trucks and everything, and a bunch of stuff, going back and forth and everything. And it turned out, once we actually started discussing finances, like, their family was fucking drowning in debt. Like, it was all just a big lie. They had tricked me into thinking that they suddenly were members of an affluent class. And when she finally revealed all this to me, I was like, wow, so you're in a similar, like, financial situation as us. So, like, wow. I felt sorry for her and everything, because I know what it's like to be in that kind of boat, but I've gotten out of it myself. Like I've dug myself out of that grave before, but still, I know the suffering and everything, and I felt sorry for her, but too bad that fucking relationship just kind of blew up with I don't unknown reasons, My ex never was able to explain it. It was just, I'm gonna do this kind of thing in 4 days, because my cousin died on the 4th, and or on April, and I just ever since I've had this thing about these numbers, and yeah, that's my ex partner in that, that I'm thinking of here, and yeah, like the family superficially had the appearance of having a bunch of money, but once you drilled into their finances, you ended up realizing, oh my god, this is all of it is financed on a massive amount of debt that they're gonna have to repay at some point, and it just and most of the people that out there in their society, like they look like they've got money, are usually just drowning in debt in secret, and this is happening all over the place, and if you're spending $80 on a fucking cup, for water bottle culture, you got ripped off, but you bully other people into making the same bad financial decisions you made, by spending $80 on a cup. You're bullying them and everything to submit to this because you cannot stand to see anybody in the working class gain escape velocity because it makes you feel stupid and worthless. That's the real reason why you're doing it. You're miserable, and so you have to make sure that everybody else stays miserable and broke just like you. And so you bully other people for not having a real Stanley Cup, which cost 80 fucking bucks.